Hello everybody, well it's Essendon versus the Sydney Swans this week, twilight game from Marvel Stadium on Saturday afternoon. It's a bit of an 8-point game with both teams occupying similar positions around the ladder and I guess with similar prospects as to their fates this season. So we're going to get into everything about the match right now. So the first thing that's notable about this fixture is the matches have traditionally been very close. Well, if you look at the modern history of these teams, of the last 22 games between these teams, 12 of them have been decided by 10 points or less. So every second game is a thriller, basically, and that's over a long period of time. We have the historical edge on the Swans. We've won 134 and they've won 95. We have lost, however, 6 of the last 7 games. If you like this channel, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube algorithm when you do so. It'll ensure that you never miss a video. It only takes a second to click it, and it doesn't cost any money. So I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button right now. So the reality is, look, we haven't really been playing that well, but we've been getting the job done. We've won 4 of our last 5 matches, even though our last 3 scores have been 65, 66, and 67 points respectively. We just haven't really been putting the score on the board. However, we've kept the opposition to, well, the last 5 games, we've kept the opposition to 60 points, 57 points, 75 points, 107, that was Collingwood, and then 62. So we are keeping the opposition to relatively low scores, although it has to be said we've played some pretty average teams in that time, Melbourne, North Melbourne and West Coast, so that has to be taken into account. But we are just going. But we're getting the job done. We fell over the line in scrappy circumstances against North Melbourne. We don't need to go all over the details of that, but we only kicked 1 goal in the last 3 quarters, and the Swans had a good win over Greater Western Sydney. I guess the issue for the Swans, there's a couple of issues here which does give us, the Bombers, some hope in this game. And that's Sydney do have a pretty lengthy injury list. A lot of key players are out and will continue to be out. Amati is out. Cunningham is out. Papley is still out for another month. Mills is out. Errol Goulden, probably one of their top 3 players, is out. Fox is out. Logan McDonald is out. The only players that might return this week, and it's a might, are Taylor Adams and Wicks. And this also, when you combine with the fact that we have a 9-day break going into this game and the Swans have a 6-day break. Now, I don't think 6-day breaks are necessarily a disadvantage, but when you compare it to a 9-day break, that's a big, big variable to take into account. And before Thursday night games were a thing, this wasn't really a factor. You know, you'd have teams that have 1-day difference or a 2-day difference, but a 3-day difference, a 9-day break compared to a 6-day break, especially when you take into account the team with the 6-day break, the Swans are the ones travelling, that's nearly half a week more to prepare for this game. So that's probably something that I think will be advantageous for us, having, an extra 3 days to prepare. I don't know if the Swans are going to make any changes to their team based on, player fatigue or anything. I doubt it. Maybe if you had a 5-day break like Collingwood do against Fremantle this week, you'd do that. But certainly the fact that we have a 9-day break, advantages us. So before we get into the team lineups, we have to have a look at what Essendon need to do to win this game. Why are we not kicking big scores? Why in the last 3 weeks have we not been able to kick more than about 10 or 11 goals? Well, if you start looking at some of the numbers, I think it comes down to the way we are moving the ball. And we'll get into that as I go through some of these numbers. If you look at disposals, we are second for disposals with 379 disposals per game. Sydney are 13th with 349 disposals per game. But for metres gained, we are 15th. Right? We're the 4th worst team in the competition with 5,500 metres gained per match, and Sydney are the 6th best with 6,000. So we have more disposals than any other team in the competition, bar one, but we're one of the worst teams in the competition at actually gaining ground. So that tells you that we're moving the ball too slowly, and when we get the ball into our inside 50, the opposition is really set, and it's making it very difficult for us to take contested marks. I've been on this channel quite a bit that our contested marks inside 50 are amongst the worst in the competition. We are always outmarked inside 50. The opposition always takes more, and that's because the opposition is set. We move the ball too slowly, and it's sort of astonishing that we can have more disposals than any other team except one, and yet be only 3 teams are worse than us in terms of actually gaining ground. So we get 48 inside 50s per game, which is the 15th in the competition. Only 3 teams worse than us in getting an inside 50, and Sydney are the 7th best in that with 54 per game. It is true that we're converting a little bit more this season. We're being a bit more careful with how we get it in there. Last season we were kind of bombing it in the inside, into the inside 50 arcs. This season we're trying to be a bit more efficient with how we score, and we are being more efficient with how we score. But the problem is we're not getting it in there that much. So if you just have a look at the inside 50 differences, we have a negative 3.4 differential for inside 50s per game compared to the opposition. Sydney are +1. So basically, we're too slow to move the ball, and we don't get it in there enough when we do move it. So I think the answer to this is, well, it's harder to implement. It's easier to say and harder to implement, but we just need to move the ball quicker. I mean, this seems to be the key to, the success of AFL teams. Most scores are generated through ball movement. I mean, there are 3 ways that you can, get scores. You can get it through turnover, you can get it through stoppage, from kickouts, and the reality is that most scoring is done from turnover. So once you get the ball, you really just need to go and you just need to take off, and we just need to be more proactive. I guess part of the problem is we just lack a little bit of class. So apart from merit, we just don't really have the players that some other teams do to be able to pull this off. Admittedly, we did look pretty good in the first quarter last week against North Melbourne. We kicked 6 goals, but the pressure from North Melbourne was sort of non-existent in that first quarter. Once you ramp the pressure up, and I'm sure Sydney will be ramping the pressure up on the weekend, you're not going to be kicking 6 goals every quarter. You're going to actually have to work for it. There are a few things that we've got going in our favour, and these are good things. They're positives, but in a way it's a negative. Well, it's not really, but I'll explain what I mean. Contested possession difference, we are +8, which is fantastic, and Sydney are -7. So we have a huge advantage over Sydney in contested possessions. We're one of the best teams in the competition at contested possession differential. We have 8 more contested possessions per game than the opposition. Sydney have 7 less. We're also the best team in the competition by some way at post-clearance contested possession. We're first, and we have a +8.6 differential compared to the opposition, and Sydney are third worst with -6.5. And once again, that's all great. It's just that particular stat is not where most scores come from. All right, most scores come from turnover, and most scores come from ball movement. So it's absolutely fantastic that we're excellent in contested possession, and it's great that post-clearance contested possession we're the best in the competition. But you sort of need to be the best at the things that are relevant. Now, it's you want to be the best at that, yes, but you also want to be the best or among the best at the things that actually generate scores more often. Another example, post-clearance ground balls, we're the second in the competition, +6.7 differential. Sydney are -1.3 and 13th. Once again, it's great that we're number 2 in the competition for that stat, and it's an important stat, but most of the scoring is done off turnover and ball movement. So that is the area that we need to improve on. It's great that we're great at contested possession, and that's something we should hang our hat on. But we also have to look at our weaknesses and improving those areas, because that is what's holding us back from scoring at the moment. Just some other stats looking at the two teams. Hard ball gets, we have a 3.6 positive differential compared to our opposition each week. Sydney are -1.8. Loose ball gets, we have +3.9 differential, which is really good. Sydney -0.6. Stoppage clearances, we're +3.4 differential, which is second in the competition. Sydney are +1.6. So there's definitely a lot of things that we're doing right. Which does give me some hope that we can turn around the things that we're doing wrong. But I just go back to that, metres gained stat where we're, the number 1 team or number 2 team for disposals, but 15th for metres gained. We actually have a -270 differential for metres gained compared to our opposition game by game, -270, and the Swans are in the positive at +56. So to me, that's probably the key. We just need to move the ball quicker. If we do that, we've got every chance of improving our scoring and having a good win on the weekend against the Swans. So just a look at the teams. This is the Sydney team from last week, and I suspect they will probably go in close to unchanged. They didn't suffer any injuries during the match last week. if you just look at their injury list, only really Taylor Adams, who's kind of on the cusp of returning, could come back into the side. They still have got a lot of players out. And they're going to be a hard opponent, as all teams are. They played in last year's grand final, of course, but really they are not the team, and haven't been for quite some time, that dominated the first half of last year. Even when they got to the grand final last year, if you look at the halfway point of the year, they were something like 12 wins, 1 loss, a percentage of 150 odd. They were set for one of the great home and away seasons of all time. The last 12 games of last season, they only won half their games and had a percentage of less than 100. And we're not talking about a sample size of just 3 or 4 games. We're talking about the last dozen games of the year. So they were really a 50-50 side from the midway point of last year. That's just the reality of it. And you could say, well, yeah, they still got into the grand final, but even that is kind of misleading. They only really got in because Isaac Heaney played the game of his life in the qualifying final against GWS and won the game off his own boot in a narrow win. I mean, they only just won that, and that was through individual brilliance from one player. And then they had a kind of a soft opponent in Port Adelaide in the preliminary final. So they sort of got into the grand final with the 2 games at the SCG, one through individual brilliance and one through just playing a soft opponent, and then got smashed in the grand final. And then this year, that's kind of continued. They've just been a 50-50 team, or even slightly worse. So over the course of 17 or 18 consecutive matches now, they've only really been going, win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. So they're a 50-50 team, really, and have been for the best part of 12 months. So they're a beatable team, all right? They're a beatable team. Yes, we need to increase our scoring output. We need to stop, Blakey's creativity off half-back. He can be a bit of a, barometer for them down there, steaming out of the back line. And obviously you look at their best players, and if we can shut down Warner and Heaney, then basically you go a long way towards winning the game. Easier said than done, of course, but that really is the Sydney lineup. As for the Bombers, well, there will be 3 changes, of course, that we can be pretty much confirmed. We know Ridley is out with a hamstring injury. We know that Harrison Jones is out with a long-term ankle injury, and we know that Gresham is out, and those are confirmed outs. So it's pretty much been unofficially confirmed, is how I would put it, that Lewis Hayes will be in the team. Lewis Hayes was pulled out of the VFL side. He was managed, which leads me, everyone to believe that he's going to replace Ridley, right? A backman for a backman. I think that's a no-brainer. And Shield, I think, will come back into the side. Dylan Shield wasn't dropped. He was really managed. He's obviously been playing pretty good football the last few weeks. Obviously one of the oldest players on the list, so it makes sense that he's managed a few times during the year. And Caldwell, one of our top probably 3 or 4 players, is due back this week. They said he was back for the Sydney game, so we'll take the club at their word. Caldwell will come back into the team most likely, so it'll be Caldwell, Shield and Hayes in for Ridley, Gresham and Jones. The question for me is, will there be a 4th change? Will there be another change in there? Hobbs, I think, got a bit of a knock last week. He wasn't officially injured, but I think he finished the game on the bench with a bit of a corky or some sort of knock. Could he come out of the side? Could Menzie possibly get dropped? Let me know, guys. I find it amazing with Menzie, and I know he played a good game against Melbourne, how often he's the sub, and yet how often he's not actually dropped. I mean, if you're the sub, you're effectively the 23rd player picked, right? You're the last player picked, effectively, right? So it's amazing how often you can be the 23rd player, the last player picked, but never the 24th, right? It doesn't really seem to make any sense how you can be the 23rd so often and never the 24th. I'd love to see someone like Zach Johnson in. It won't happen this week because I'm certain that Brad Scott will not play 2 first gamers in the one match. That's just not going to happen. But I think Zach Johnson would be fantastic for some of the things that we're struggling at. Meters gained, quick ball movement, class. He's got all those things. I mean, has he got the defensive side to his game up yet? Well, that's something the club want to work on. But I'm more of a F around and find out type of person. I like taking risks. And sometimes if you play people, you find something out about them. And, you discover a few things that you might not have known. And sometimes players can adapt to the level when you play them. So I'd love to see Zach Johnson, who's been getting 30 possessions in the VFL, perhaps in for a Menzie or a Hobbs. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think there'll probably just be the 3 changes. I don't think Brad Scott will want to make more changes than that. I'd love to see Johnson in for Menzie or Hobbs, but I don't think that's going to happen. Although, to be fair, in his last press conference, Brad Scott did say, in regards to Zach Johnson, he said it may be sooner than you think. So, look, you can interpret that however you want. Is it just an off-the-hand comment that doesn't mean anything to the media? Or does he mean what he says? But my prediction is that we'll see the 3 ins of Caldwell, Shield and Lewis Hayes in for the 3 injured players, and they will probably be the 3 changes that we'll see this week. There has been some talk that Vigo Vicentini could come into the side. Look, I don't think that's going to happen. Goldstein is coming off a 9-day break. So 9-day break, they're not going to, manage him for that. I wouldn't have thought. And yes, Goldstein was well beaten by Sherry from North Melbourne last week. But look, Sherry's one of the best ruckmen in the competition, probably second only to Max Gawn at the moment. So that was always on the cards. That was always going to happen. Look, and I don't think they're going to bring in a first gamer up against Brodie Grundy. I think they'll have Goldstein go up against Grundy himself this week. There is a possibility, I guess, Guelphy could come in, possibly to replace Gresham, but Guelphy has been out for 10 weeks. Didn't do a whole lot in the VFL, and I think he probably needs another game in the VFL. But look, Brad Scott obviously likes Guelphy. And, you have to acknowledge that is a possibility that Guelphy could come back into the side. But, look, I don't think we're going to see Vigo in the team yet. Guelphy, have to say, it is a possibility, but I think the odds are probably against it. So my prediction for this game, well, there's a bit of pessimism around the Bombers because we just haven't been playing that well. But the reality is we've won 4 out of 5. We have a 9-day break compared to a 6-day break, and the Swans have a few injuries. They have won 6 out of 7 against us, Sydney. But one thing I do think about this match, I think it's going to be close. I definitely think it's going to be close. Look, these matches always are. I don't think Sydney are playing well enough to win easily. They're just not. They could, of course. I could be wrong, but they're certainly not playing well enough to have a big win. On the road, 3 days less preparation than Essendon. I think I'm going to tip Essendon in a narrow one by 7 points. But look, this could go either way. Maybe I'm just biased talking there. Sydney are a slight favourite with the bookmakers. But I just have a feeling that, the close wins we've had have given us a little bit of confidence. And I think the ends, even though it's obviously terrible for Jones with his ankle injury, the reality is I don't think Jones and Gresham were really playing that well. So it does force Brad Scott's hand a little bit. And if you look at our team with Caldwell and Shield coming in, they are classy players. And that's one thing we've always lacked. I've said apart from merit, we do lack a bit of class. But one of the couple of players we do have that have class are Shield and Caldwell. They just are, probably, in terms of skill level, they're probably our, in the top 5 players in terms of, genuine skill. So how you rate them in other areas, I guess, can be debatable. But Caldwell, I think, is a great player in nearly every aspect of the game. So I think our team does look pretty good on paper. I know we've got the injuries, but one thing we do have is a little bit of depth. We've got the ability to bring in Hayes. He is a first gamer. Obviously, he'll be a little bit raw. You can't really replace Ridley. But look, Zach Reed's been doing really well down there. He's had 4 games in a row where he scored over 100, ranking points or around 100 ranking points. He's showing the potential to be a future leader of the club down there. So, and the defence has stood up in recent times. You can say all you want about our, lack of, output and efficiency in the forward line, but we have kept teams to pretty low scores in recent times. So, I think we can get over the line here in front of a Essendon crowd at home. I think it's going to be close. It obviously wouldn't surprise me if Sydney win. It's just one of those games that, is always a bit of a coin toss game. And I think this will be in the balance in time on in the last quarter. Whichever way the result goes, I think we're not going to know what the result is 20 minutes into the last quarter. It's going to be in the balance. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Who do you think is going to come into the side? Who do you want into the side? What would you do to the side in terms of your ins and outs? Who do you think is going to win? Is there anything I've missed or that you disagree with me on? Let me know in the comments. Have a great day, everybody. I hope you're all going to the game. I'll be there. As always, go Bombers.